Another Telegraph scoop. We reveal the truth about the Chinese super embassy, which will contain 208 secret rooms, one of them just 1 metre away from vital British cables.
We speak to Sir Ian Duncan Smith, China hawk, sanctioned by the communist regime, who says the Prime Minister Keir Starmer has lied and lied and lied to the public about this proposal.
Every denial that the government has made to us about the usage, the location, and the communications cables is an absolute unmitigated lie. They have lied their way through this process from start to finish, and there will almost certainly be a judicial review of the way they behaved on this, because this has broken every rule in the book when it comes to planning on this.
One of our Telegraph colleagues has got hold of the unredacted plans for China's super embassy in London.
Whoop, whoop. Scoop alert.
Which reveals a hidden chamber that would sit right next to where some of Britain's most sensitive communication cables run.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Did you hear that? They've got hold of the unredacted plans detailing this giant Chinese super embassy, and it's getting too close to comfort to communication cables, vital communication cables. They shouldn't be anywhere near it. China shouldn't have an embassy of that size anywhere near England's capital city. And what you're about to see in this video, I tell you, is nothing short of mind-blowing. Let's go through it.
That room would sit within a network of 208 secret underground rooms, which could then be used to tap into financial data and email and messaging traffic for millions of internet users. Now, most of the basement level of the super embassy in the plans was redacted so that people couldn't see it, supposedly for security reasons. And despite all of this fishy stuff going on, Keir Starmer is still expected to approve these plans ahead of a visit to China later this month to meet President Xi Jinping. Well, we're joined by Gareth Caulfield, the Telegraph journalist who got hold of these unredacted plans. Gareth, you and the video producer Louis Brady have put together a video on this, which you can watch right now on the Telegraph's YouTube channel. And we're going to listen now to you talking about those critical cables that would run just 1 meter away from a secret room in China's super embassy.
Those cables are in fact right beneath me, about 50 centimeters or 18 inches under my feet. And to my right, that wall is the edge of the proposed Chinese embassy site, with a basement running directly underneath it, and which is redacted on China's plans. Now, we measure this distance from the access chamber here to the embassy, exactly 100 centimeters. And what is even more concerning is that we know from the plans that China intends to demolish parts of the basement and its surrounding walls. This means their workmen will be digging right next to these cables.
So, Gareth,
the workmen will be digging right next to those cables. Can you imagine that? Right next to the cables, and also if they want to demolish part of the existing basement, what are they going to do with it? Extend it out? Do something with those cables? Why are the plans redacted in the first place? What's so secretive? And meanwhile, all this has been lied about, let through. Unbelievable.
An extensive investigation by you. I know you've been working on this for many weeks. Just go into a bit more detail about what these unredacted plans actually show.
So what these plans show us is just how close China's basement comes in the embassy building to the fibre-optic cables that run alongside it. Now, although we knew previously that generally there were cables somewhere nearby and it was a potential security risk, we didn't know until now that they were coming within 1.7 meters of these cables. And not only that, but that they would be demolishing and rebuilding the underground wall directly next to the cables themselves. So it's not only that they're close to them, but they're close to them and they're out of sight of the authorities. So we cannot actually see what it is the Chinese will be doing during their construction works there. We also...
Did you hear that? The same way I did. We won't know what the Chinese will be doing with their construction work near those cables. Fibre optic cables, I work with fibre optics in my IT days, and there's an awful lot you can do if you really wanted to, given that situation. Now, let's continue. You think this is worse already? The best is yet to come, or the worst.
Also know from the plans that there are hot air extracting systems that will be installed in the basement, one at either end. That is the sort of equipment you install if you've got a large number of, for example, computer servers in there.
Yeah.
And if you're running a sort of national grade espionage station, you'd have a lot of computers which generate a lot of heat, a lot of hot air, and that needs to be removed.
Just a quick one on that, Gareth. I mean, some might argue, look, you're leaping to some extraordinary conclusions here. Okay, yes, this room is in very close proximity to cables that run data from the City of London to the rest of the country, if not the world, but you haven't actually got any concrete evidence at all that spying is likely to take place in this basement.
Well, it would be a lovely thing if we did have a smoking gun of a Chinese spy caught in the act.
Yeah.
If the plans actually read spy room here.
That would be good.
That would be the ideal, wouldn't it? You know?
I mean, I can appreciate why you've jumped to the conclusion you have, and I think it's a perfectly logical one.
Yeah, I think it's a perfectly logical one. What you've got to think here is that you look at the equipment that's going in the rooms adjacent to the cables and think about the possibility of what could be going on in those rooms. Again, from my IT days, I know locations of buildings that servers get installed in, mainframes and all that sort of thing. The amount of heat they kick out is going to be a lot more than the days when I worked with it. A lot more. So you have to wonder. And also, as you know, we'll discover later on in this video what's going on. So, you know, keep watching. Why take the risk of allowing the Chinese an embassy or a location within our capital city that rides so close to those cables? Don't make any sense.
Not least because of what we know in recent times about the Chinese spying scandal and the collapse of that case and all the rest of it. And let's be honest, the country has got quite an illustrious history when it comes to spying on its friends as well as its enemies. But what's the most disturbing aspect of this story? It's this idea of the close proximity, but the wall demolition is so suspicious, isn't it?
That's exactly it. You know, if you're just refitting the building and you're gutting it and putting up new partitions and paintings of the dear leader and so on, that's one thing. But when you're demolishing the exterior parts directly next to sensitive communications infrastructure, you know, maybe it is an innocent thing. Maybe the wall is worn out and needs to be replaced. Perhaps they're putting a gym and a sauna down in the basement. But
there's no way they are putting a gym and a sauna down in that basement. Come off it.
Given China's track record, and indeed our own track record in the West doing this sort of thing, there is, you know, it's suspicious and it's a risk. And I suggest that it's a risk that the government has not really looked at closely for whatever reason that might be.
Can you tell us something about these cables, who they serve, what might one be able to tap into if you were able to do so?
So these cables run between the City of London and Canary Wharf, these sort of Docklands financial complex down there. And if you trace them further out, they go west to the big data center complexes in Slough. And from Slough, they go to the rest of the world. They tap into the transatlantic links to America and so on. What you're getting at the Royal Mint Court site is the bottleneck, the vital bottleneck, where all of these different parts come together as they plug into Canary Wharf. So if you can tap into that, you are spying on, obviously, all of the British financial traffic. You're spying on potentially the government departments based in Canary Wharf in Docklands, down in Westbury. You're potentially getting a tap into the data traffic going from Europe, from Brussels and places like that, across to America via our transatlantic cables down from Cornwall in Bude. It really is the jugular vein of the internet as it passes through Britain, I would say, at that location.
What?
So are you getting the seriousness of this? I mean, if you look at the overall agenda, shall we say, with regard to all of the parts and pieces of the global operations, what's going on, I'm trying to say it as best I can to make your brains go ping. China plays a very, very big part of all of that. And if they put an embassy in place in London in close proximity to those cables, and you've just heard how important they are, this shouldn't be allowed, should it? It's too damn risky, to say the least.
What's curious about all this is obviously the unredacted plans are new to us because the public hadn't had the chance to see them until you wrote this brilliant expose, Gareth. The security services and the police and others have seen them. They must have seen them, right? Do we think?
That's an interesting question. We know that just before a certain national newspaper prompted her departure from government, Angela Rayner had publicly demanded that the Chinese show copies of the unredacted plans to her department, the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Affairs, local government, whatever it is. And what we don't know, obviously, as her departure from government last August indicated, was what the Chinese response to that was. Now, I'm told that when the Conservatives were in power, they made a similar request through the normal channels behind closed doors. And what they got back was essentially the redacted plans again, but zoomed in slightly. And that doesn't really suggest that there's a great deal of candor or openness on the Chinese side here.
That's right. You know, you drill a little bit further and you ask for those plans in further detail. And what you have is a situation where they're just going to take the piss, send you the same plans again, zoomed in a bit and hoping you won't notice. You know, planning issues of another kind cost Angela Rayner her position. Don't you think Starmer should quit over this? This situation, let's get it right, has been going on before this Labour government. It's been in discussion and everything else, but we got to the point where the plans for this embassy are going ahead under Starmer's watch. And as will become clear later on in this video, there is an amount of lying going on, an amount of dishonesty that's going on, an amount of playing with our national security that's going on that's totally off the scale. And meanwhile, Starmer is where he is. It's all becoming very clear if you think about it and put the parts and pieces together.
Why I ask that is because I've interviewed successive ministers who've had some involvement in this and questioned why on earth they are allowing this super embassy to go ahead, not least because it's enormous and it's on a historic site, but also because of these continued rumours about underground chambers and spy tunnels and close proximity to our cables. And the reason that's always given back to me is, oh, well, the police and the security services are okay with it. And I'm like, well, can they be? And if they are, have they been party to all of the information? One wonders, Gareth, if your reporting might be placed under the noses of those down the river at MI5 or beyond, and there may need to be a rethink.
Well, quite. I mean,
the police are okay with this. The local authorities are okay with this. Aren't you sensing some bit of a problem with that very statement, considering what we've just discussed and what's been revealed so far? What are MI5 going to say about this? What are MI6 going to say about this? Something is going on and it stinks. Really, really stinks.
I gather that the security services were not happy when the Chinese bought the site in 2018. I think it was sort of 255 million they spent on it. And that objections were, again, behind closed doors, quietly raised with the government today to say, is this a wise idea letting the Chinese set up shop at this location, given the communications cables that run directly on their doorstep in a very literal sense? And that's, again, this is sort of the rumours and the hearsay and the whispers on which our weird and wonderful world operates. But I gather that although those objections were heard, ultimately a political decision or a series of political decisions were made as sort of brush that under the carpet and say, well, we've got a greater priority here. Chinese diplomatic engagement is deeply important to us. And there's also the dimension where the Chinese, I'm told, are trying to play quid pro quo with our embassy in Beijing.
Yes.
We want to expand our embassy in Beijing, and the Chinese are saying, well, we're going to make that a condition of you approving our mega embassy. Tit for tat.
Tit for tat. Tit for tat. What do you mean tit for tat? This isn't about tit for tat. This is about national security. We may have an embassy in Beijing. We may want to expand that embassy in Beijing. But the main thing I care about, and I'm sure the main thing you care about, is our own national security, particularly the integrity of that information going through those cables. And I draw your attention back to the wall they want to demolish, barely a metre away from that access junction. This gets juicier.
Although there isn't equivalence there, because this embassy in the UK that it's proposed is far, far bigger than, well, apparently any other embassy, but also our plans for Beijing.
It will, yes, the Chinese one over here in London will certainly be the biggest in Europe if completed. I think the site is 5.5 acres or 22,000 square meters big. It's substantial, and it's going to have accommodation for 200 people living in there as well. Our presence in Beijing is nowhere near that scale. It is, if you're standing on the street and looking at it, I gather it would be a big building, just as any other building would be. But we're not talking about, essentially an apartment complex with integrated offices and an underground car park and a network of basements and tunnels and bathrooms, even lift shafts, all sorts of equipment where you would have a lot of people living in one place for a very long time.
Yes. Why would you need people living there overnight, Tim?
Camilla just set a very good question there, a very good question. Living accommodation, bathrooms, underground tunnels, car parking, everything else. An embassy is a place, surely you go to work, do your job, go home. So why is all this being set up? And why were the Chinese messing around with redacted plans when the unredacted ones are now available? And I keep going back to that wall. The problem is with this government that we have currently, you can see this going through unless something drastic happens. And then what? Are you going to let North Korea have an embassy?
Unless they were up to no good.
Well, it's the Hotel California.
Exactly.
They would never leave, would they? That's the thing, is that the scale of the plans are not just arrogant, but suspicious as well, aren't they?
Yes.
Because you normally expect large numbers of staff to live elsewhere. Why do Chinese personnel have to live on site?
No, they don't.
As if they're carving out a little bit of China in the middle of London.
The whole thing absolutely stinks. Do we think Starmer might be minded to change his mind? As you mentioned earlier, the Telegraph was responsible.
Camilla's right there. The whole thing does absolutely stink.
Part for the departure of the Deputy Prime Minister. Could we change minds on this?
That was
too?
also over a planning issue.
It was too. We're good at.
Well, it was over a house purchase issue.
When it comes to planning, the Telegraph appears to be the most.
Every time an MP clicks on right move, we're there.
We're there. Yeah, that's because we're on a par with estate agents in the popularity stakes. But back to the case in point, Gareth, do we think this newspaper may again have moved the dial on this issue?
I like to believe that we have moved the dial. I have certainly heard that a lot of existing government narratives around this, including such claims as there are no sensitive cables here and there's nothing to worry about, which is a line given to other newspapers who reported this story previously in the past. That all seems to have been blown out of the water by this, because nobody's ever sat down, looked at this and figured out these are where specific cables owned by specific companies run, and this is how close they are to the embassy. Now that we have published these details and they're out there for everyone, I really do like to think that some sensible people are going to have a quiet word with Labour behind the scenes and say, look, now it's all out there. Everyone knows what we've known between ourselves. You really can't carry on like this anymore. You've got to be seen to be doing something.
I imagine that M.
That's a good, valid point there. You know, the media, in this case, the Telegraph, has turned the tables on this. I don't trust the mainstream media at all. But that being said, there are certain portions of the media which will bring potential information to the public eye that we need to know about, particularly with this. And certainly, Starmer's government Starmer himself should put a stop to this. Absolutely put a stop to it. Otherwise, bye-bye. That's what I think.
Might be on the phone to PM momentarily.
I think M is PC now, which is why that sort of thing doesn't happen.
Oh, really?
We hear from the government.
Go on then, yeah.
The government has
let's
said
hear
national
this.
security is our first duty. And government security experts have been involved throughout the process so far. Why do their statements always sound like they're about to say, if you want to hear more, press 1?
Yes.
As the Home Office and Foreign Office have previously set out, all the security implications of the planning application have been identified and addressed. An independent planning decision will be made by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government in due course. China's London embassy did not respond to requests for comment, but presumably it is listening next door with a glass to the wall.
And just to update you there, I did in fact get a response late last night. I shall read it in full. It says, "Good evening. Sorry for the late reply. We have stated our position more than once. The position remains unchanged. Yours sincerely."
That's from the Chinese embassy.
And that is from the Chinese embassy.
That's more.
In other words, they don't want to talk about it. They want to push their plans through, and they just want us all to be happy with what's going on, and we're not.
I like it.
Isn't
I
it?
think I prefer that.
Straight to the point.
I don't know what their position is, but I'm glad that they're sticking to it.
Yes.
Gareth, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Daily Tea, and congratulations on your brilliant scoop.
Camilla, thank you very much.
So, Ian Duncan Smith, thank
Right, this is going to be very interesting now. You're going to hear from Ian Duncan Smith with a little bit more of the political side of this, his own experience, and some very revealing information. So let's go ahead and play this, and we'll dig down into this situation a little bit more.
Thank you for joining us on the Daily Tea. Friend to this podcast, famed China hawk, sanctioned by the regime. You must have read today's Telegraph splash with a degree of horror, although not perhaps surprise.
Well, not really. I did actually see it yesterday evening, so it's a little bit more in advance than today. Bear in mind that there's been a row about the plans that China had for this site. They were redacted. The government had asked them to unredact them, and they refused. And this has been going on for some time. There's something else that they've refused during the course of this.
Remember that the government wanted unredacted plans. China stuck 2 fingers up. I wouldn't have let them have their embassy.
Planning process, which is critical. The government said that the deal would be they would have this site and they would close down their embassy site that existed, and they said no. So this has been going on for some time. So every time the government's asked them to do something within their planning requirements, they've literally, by and large, rejected it. So this has been extracted. And I take my hat off to the Telegraph for having got hold of it and for having published it. But it shows that every denial that the government has made to us about the usage, the location, and the communications cables is an absolute unmitigated lie.
Do you hear that? Lie, lie, lie.
They have lied their way through this process from start to finish, and there will almost certainly be a judicial review of the way they behaved on this, because this has broken every rule in the book when it comes to planning on this.
Almost certainly will be a judicial review. Now, just as a small aside, I'm going to be taking my local council to a judicial review when they respond to some information I've put in, and I'm well aware of the cost of my judicial review, and compared with this, I'm chicken feed. So you can imagine the millions of pounds further that this will cost in argument and barracking about. It's an unbelievably colossal amount of money that we're talking about here, as well as, of course, national security.
The cables are there. For some reason, MFI were encouraged to say they didn't have a problem. They never said they weren't. They just said that they didn't. They thought they could deal with this. But the reality is they were there. The government denied these cablings important. We knew very well that previously that 2 other banking organizations had occupied the site, so the cabling went straight through into the site. You know, this nonsense about denial after denial after denial is completely ridiculous. But it's been
cables went directly into the site. What more can I say?
Very bad. And this government's been the worst. The previous government also was happy to see them have it, and we fought that as well. But this government has bent over backwards for the Chinese to have this site. There's no reason for it.
Previous government. what you have to remember, we're all going Starmer, 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 Starmer. Yes, they're bending over backwards to make sure that this goes through, but previous government, this was happening then too. So they're all as bad as each other, but really, Keir Starmer needs to consider his position, especially in the wake of all these lies coming out.
For it. When the Americans wanted a much enlarged site, they went south of the river to an area that doesn't have this sort of problem of confluence of issues, etc., that exist with the city, with MI5 and MI6 on the cabling run, Canary Wharf, all these sort of things. Plus, also, it's right in a tourist attraction, right smack bang opposite the Tower of London, and it occupies. This is the most horrific part of it, I think. It occupies a very important site for our history, which is to do with the concept of our currency. I mean, it's just quite ridiculous. So I take my hat off to the Telegraph. Well done yet again for having got this, because it really opens up the debate again.
So, Ian, how do...
Opposite the Tower of London. You know who they used to put in the Tower of London back in the day? England has massive problems here. Massive problems.
the Chinese keep getting away with this sort of thing, and why do British governments let them do it?
That's what I'd like to know.
Well, I think the whole problem is that China has become quite dominant in global marketplaces, and because they've become one of the greatest manufacturers and producers of equipment, of technology, etc. They've done that for a variety of ways. Some of it has been through massive subsidization against the WTO rules. The other side of it has been they use slave labor regularly in a lot of their manufactured products, which means they are definitely by nature cheaper. Solar arrays, batteries, you name it, they make.
If you think of the amount of imported stuff that comes in from China, it's not built to last anymore. It's mass produced by God knows who, God knows where, by very poorly paid individuals who are treated like crap. And it's just imported cheap crap in the main. And it's that system of total recycling those goods on a regular basis over and over again because they don't last. And China's got their mitts into all of it.
A lot of it through slave labor. And finally, of course, successive British governments in pursuit of trade have chased after this elusive Chinese deal that they want. Remember the golden decade under Osborne and Cameron, which I thought was ridiculous. I called it, I think the officials actually called it Project Kowtow, but it was certainly what I referred to as Project Kowtow. On bended knee, please China, give us something. And this government has pursued it on steroids. I mean, it's quite ridiculous. There's literally nothing that they won't give to the Chinese to get some fabled trade arrangement, which will basically lead only to one thing. China will dump all of their overproduced cars, batteries, solar arrays, because they've carried on manufacturing at a rate where the economy was growing at over 5%. But we know the domestic economy has crashed. And so there isn't the demand domestically. So they are now determined to dump goods elsewhere. And we'll be opening the door for that. We won't have.
There you go. We will just be a dumping ground for their waste.
A steel industry left. We won't have a car industry left by the time they're finished, but of course the government will be happy because we will have trade, and that noticeably will help their growth, they think, and it's not going to.
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing is the fact that we're giving away any self-sufficiency we did have to other political unions. The United Kingdom is a political union in itself, but you know, we're taxing our own farmers out of existence. We're taxing our own businesses out of existence. Major employers, we're linking ourselves to a European superstate, which in my view needs to just disappear. And the individual nations need to reclaim their sovereignty. And I include England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland in that. And then you talk about China on top of things, and you want to let a bloody great embassy in London, that close to what we've been discussing. This is very, very revealing information. In fact, very revealing. Let's see what else.
You mentioned judicial review earlier. Feasibly, if Keir Starmer is minded to give this the green light, regardless of the expose that the Telegraph has orchestrated today, can anything be done to stop it? What can parliamentarians do if the Labour government is intent on allowing this to go ahead?
Well, bear in mind, it's not just about parliamentarians. There are 200 residents, British citizens, resident on the site. There
you go. Remember the accommodation for 200 people. It's on the site already. What happens to them? And it's not the best of it. Have a listen.
also an ex-monastery, an Cistercian monastery site, which exists on the site. And they were told to make open access to that. And there's real questions about how those residents will be able to get to and fro. None of that was settled within this process. And they simply rejected any of the observations that the government made. So it will be the residents, I suspect, who have the full right to challenge this, because we need to get to the bottom of this. Remember, before the last election, in exasperation, the Chinese administration said, President Xi himself, I think, said, that they would not bother, after they got turned down by Tower Hamlets, they would not bother to put in another application unless they had the assurance that it would succeed. Labour gets into government, and then all of a sudden, they put in their second planning application. Now, bear that in mind for a second. When you see that last year, Starmer sat at a table with President Xi, and what was the first thing he said to him before the cameras were cleared away by President Xi? You will be pleased to see that we have called the planning system of the embassy in. Now, how in hell's name would President Xi know anything at all about our planning processes if he hadn't already been told the plan ahead was to call it in so that it overrides any local government decision-making in any degree at all? And that's the whole thing, is connecting together from the word go. You can see what they were determined to do by hell or high water was to give the Chinese this mega embassy on bended knee in the hope they will get their trade arrangement.
Well, if you look at this, the key point that I take right here is the fact that as soon as Labour got into power, that planning application went straight in. Imagine the timing of that. So that tells me discussions have been taking place. And also that lends credence to what you read about the overall overarching picture of what's going on everywhere else in the world, what's happening, and how it's all coming together as this big global blob at the expense of our own sovereignty, at the expense of our own national security, at the expense of our own citizens, in this case, the capital city of England, London. Remember the walk right at the beginning of this video? Unbelievable.
Given that Keir Starmer is going to be going to China, it feels very unlikely that he's up for a row with Xi over this issue. No. If it does go, assuming it does go ahead, and it looks a lot like the plans that we've got the unredacted version of, what are the security implications? What does it mean for Britain if it greenlights this embassy?
Well, first of all, I think is that the Five Eyes won't trust us. America's opposed to this. Australia and others have all made objections to the location of the site and to where, as I said earlier on, the security issues around cabling. I think it shows that we're not serious about the threats. I mean, just go back only a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. China was there, this big thing in China where they had North Korea and Russia. Putin was there, and he had them arm in arm. And he said publicly, we are on the verge of creating a new world order. China knows exactly what it wants. It wants, at the end of the day, to get rid of the nonsense of democracy and these free courts and human rights. They want their form of government. He's never shied away from telling us the only form of government that works is his form of government, dictatorship.
That's right. If you look, and you have to research it, I've put information about this on my social media channels before. There is an organisation that Nigel Farage is going to visit within the coming week that very much prescribes to the idea of what Ian Duncan Smith has just said. And the model that they want to base their entire structure on is that of China. Yes, they have great transport networks. Yes, they have clean streets. Yes, they have high-tech goods. Yes, they have, low crime rates and everything else. But at what cost? What cost? You tell me.
dictatorship, control through their communist system. And the same goes, as you see, Russia has moved massively back towards that process. They're linked together. North Korea is involved in it. Iran, of course, right now is supported heavily by China, who buys huge amounts of oil from them. And so what we are seeing right now is that we have opened our door to a regime that literally wants to see all that we believe in swept aside. All the platitudes and the trade doesn't add up to anything when you compare it against what their ambitions are. Look at them over Taiwan. You know, you have to look at the way they begin to dominate in Southeast Asia. And we have been stupid enough, government after government, to run to them in the hope that they will help us. They have no interest in helping us. They're about helping themselves. And if we don't know that, that is the biggest threat we face now. They will use their new power. 200 extra spies in that embassy are going to be rotated. They threaten the Hong Kong dissidents daily. They put bounties on their damn heads.
This is interesting.
They've sanctioned people like me because we believe in free speech. All of this is what they do now before they get this super embassy. You watch what happens when they get the super embassy. They will be everywhere. Look what happened in the compound up in Manchester when they disagreed with those dissidents outside. They dragged one of them in and beat him up. And because they were on the compound, the British government did nothing about it, absolutely nothing. It was weak and pathetic. And the Chinese eventually quietly sent those officials home and put some new ones in. No apologies, nothing. That's only a foretaste of what is to come.
Sir Ian Duncan Smith, a stark warning. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the Daily.
A stark warning indeed. A stark warning indeed. Now, there's a few points there. You know, right at the end, he talked about the compound up north, an English town, an English city with an embassy compound on it. They come out onto an English street, purloin somebody, have them in, give them the old 1-2, and then nothing. The argument will be, oh, it's not on English soil, it's on something about that smells. You look at the embassy, where it is, where it's going to be. You've got this situation where you've got the data cables, you've got plans which they seem a little bit cagey about. And hats off to the Telegraph, hats off to, you know, all the people involved in getting the unredacted plans so you can see the reality of what's going on. A metre away from those vital communication cables, and it doesn't raise any eyebrows. It makes you think, doesn't it? There's another embassy site they have, which they were talking about. Oh, no. The timing. Labour gets in, the plan gets shot straight through. The 200-bed accommodation. What is the role of those people going to be? What are they going to be up to? What is going to be in the rooms underneath street level in the basement once it's all been remodeled and rejigged the way they want it to be? So many questions come out of all of this. And in my view, as a matter of national security alone, before you think of anything else, it just simply isn't the risk. It's not worth it. No. And the fact it won't be, that tells me very clearly that there's another overriding thing going on here somewhere. And if we're not careful, we'll lose everything as a result. That's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments. I mean, this has been a very long video. It's been very revealing. Camilla, great interview. Great information revealed there. Ian Duncan Smith, absolutely loads of information there. Please share this around. Hit the like button and give me a follow on X. Subscribe to me on here. And as always, I look forward to talking to you soon. Toodaloo.